Welcome back, my little obsessive enthusiasts, to
What to Watch Now,
where we talk about what's streaming on Netflix right now. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about, in my opinion, is a highly underrated miniseries, Maniac. Now, the definition of a maniac is a person exhibiting extreme symptoms of wild behavior, especially when violent and dangerous. But what I think fits even more with this miniseries is the informal term, an obsessive enthusiast. The reason why I'm bringing up the definition is because, well, I didn't know what it meant initially. And so when I was first watching this miniseries, which I watched when it first came out, but I didn't actually have this podcast yet, so yay, full circle, I'm getting to talk about it finally. I didn't understand how the name paired with what was going on in the series. Now that I do know what it means, I'm like, holy shit, it's perfect. It perfectly sums up all the weird, wild decision-making of our main characters. And I think it makes a really important point, one of the pinnacle points of the entire series, I would argue, which it says, is their motivation, the character's motivation, built on the backbone of their mental illnesses, or is it the 1 in a million chance connection with one another and what anyone would do to foster that? And I feel like that line is beautifully blurred, and for me, those are the best points to make in any movie, whether it's talking about the idea of people suffering from trauma, mental illness, or just like anything, like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where he's overcoming a breakup. Because, I don't know, I feel like when it comes to the human experience, there is no clear conclusion. I think you kind of need a little bit of that surreal fantasy and facts merged together to come to an answer. The 3 main selling points I would say to this series to go check it out is 1, the world building. It's surreal, it's like sprinkled in Wes Anderson 80s futuristic technology in a modern day New York. So you'll be walking by and people are in, clothes you would anticipate today and normal brownstones, but then there'll be like a little futuristic robot on the ground going around cleaning dog poop. Or the way the people present ads everywhere feels a little more advanced than people walking around kind of old-fashioned cars. Or like you'll go to Central Park and everyone's just playing chess casually. Again, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between today and this world, but then someone's playing against what I assume is most likely like something to do with gambling or something. A purple robotic koala, and they're playing chess for $100. It's beautiful, and I want to be there, and I loved it. And because it's just that nice sprinkle between stuff that is technologically advanced with things that we understand today, you kind of get lost in the world a little easier, but they have a little fun with it. They're like, let's do something a little bit more. And when you are somewhere where it's full-on futuristic, and you're like in little pods, you're in the pharmaceutical trial, they don't let up with the visual stimulation with beautiful colors like lavenders and pinks and giant circle windows and the little kind of beehive hexagon looking type bed pods. You're going to have a great time watching this. I'm definitely someone who gets sucked into anything if you give me a great world that you've built. 2, the writing. As I've said time and time again, my favorite type of writing is smart writing. The type that doesn't spell it out all at once. It's kind of a great metaphor, to be honest with you, with how people get to know each other, and especially with the characters themselves. When you meet someone, maybe you hear a word or you get the idea that they're triggered by something and you don't know why. And it's not until you experience enough time with them that you eventually put the pieces together and you realize, oh, that's why you're that way, or that's that incident, or now I understand that meaning. And it's not always just spoken out, word for word. And the writing is what will keep you going the entire miniseries, and it's like a big emotional payoff as you get to know certain things. 3, the connection between these 2 strangers, Owen and Annie. I gotta be honest with you, that's something that I personally believe in real life. That pretty much anyone, not everyone, but a large variety of the public, if you put 2 people together under the right circumstances, I think they could build a bond. And I'm not talking about romance. I mean, just a general connection. I mean, I think that's why we all love shows like Lost and stuff. This idea of strangers somehow finding something in common and letting down their defenses or whatever box society has put them in, and they just get raw, vulnerable, and I think what's a perfect connection with these two is the idea that they have nothing to lose, so they're finally themselves in a way that no one else has ever seen them, and they've never truly been honest with other people. And they now share something no one else will ever understand. So you're just gonna love it for that reason. Now let's talk about the characters. The two main characters I want to talk about. All of the characters are very lovable. You're gonna love all of them. But the two main characters I would argue that sold the entire miniseries as a whole for me, and I think many other people, were Emma Stone, who plays Annie Landsberg, and Jonah Hill, who plays Owen Milgram. I mean, what a great and weird combo. I mean, I know they weren't super bad together like forever ago, but somehow the way their characters were goofy and cute and nerdy, it made sense that they would potentially end up together. When you put these two together after their lifespan of work and how opposing they are, I don't know, it's hypnotic. And to be honest with you, one of the coolest parts about the series, in case you weren't aware of it before, when they were like giving out commercials, their big thing was like Emma Stone and Jonah Hill are in this, but they didn't really let out what it was actually about. So when you went into this, all you saw were like the crazy stimulating colors. You understood they were under some sort of futuristic scientific testing. It almost looked like something out of Alien. It was really cool walking into this, to be honest with you. I would even suggest, if you want like the full experience, go watch the Netflix trailer for it and then go watch the miniseries. It's so fun when you're like, oh, that's what you were talking about. So our characters, let's start with Owen. And poor Owen is going through the gigs. He's recently been diagnosed with schizophrenia, which in the end, I don't even know if he really did have schizophrenia, and we'll get to that. But he lives in a small, futuristic, almost, I would compare it to like a Tokyo apartment because it's so small and condensed and jam-packed with a bunch of other apartments. He works a normal 9-to-5 job, but the surprise twist is he actually comes from a super well-to-do, wealthy family. And he clearly wants to set himself apart from that and wants to do his own thing. But you can see why it's more than just pure pride. His family is fucked up and likes to control him and make him feel bad about himself. I think the second they sniffed out any weakness on him, they just wanted to use that. And his brother is the devil incarnate. Just a true dickwad, because he does a lot of terrible things, including like sending anthrax through the mail and a bunch of other stuff that initially gets blamed on his brother Owen, which is what leads to some psychological diagnoses. And Owen, I think, is just too gentle and scared and frightened to say or do anything about it. Along the way, his brother does some other obscene stuff that's good as putting him through court. And they are pressuring Owen to speak well about him and say the best things that will ultimately get him let off of it. So that's kind of messed up when you are pressuring him to do this, but then you're putting him down the whole time. And I think it upsets Owen because he's a good person and he doesn't like that he is defending someone he doesn't believe in. It's also upsetting that he, I don't know if he was either romantically with or they was close at one time, his brother's fiance, and he's still clearly in love with her. And it's upsetting for him to see that she's with him and, you get that. Unfortunately, though, Owen loses his little steady job. And he needs to make money because he doesn't want his parents to know. They'll start to control him again. And he ends up signing up for this mysterious pharmaceutical trial. And all he has to do is go through the trial. He'll get paid really well and all that jazz. Now, an important thing I want to point out is during this time of his introduction, we see some of his, the things that he thinks isn't real, but he's seeing, is this image of a young woman. He knows it's delusional, but yet he sees her everywhere on like ads, on bulletin boards, wherever. And he feels like he's going crazy because he simultaneously sees this image. It's a image of his brother, but kind of dressed as someone else with glasses and everything, talking to him like he's a secret agent and that he has some mission and plan. And as much as this guy is talking to him, Owen just keeps blocking him out and saying, like, I'm not going to acknowledge you, because if I acknowledge you, I will go through a whole psychosis or whatever you want to call it, and I can't give in to that. I'm barely holding on by a string. So we get his motivation. But this is where it gets crazy. He goes to the pharmaceutical trial, and who's there? The woman. The woman he sees everywhere. He feels like it's gotta be fate or something, and he tries to talk to her. He thinks she's part of the quote-unquote mission. He starts to give in a little bit, thinking maybe he is chosen, maybe there is some secret plan, and he's given all this weight of the world. To be honest with you, all the movies we put out there that kind of foster that idea isn't really helping people, fight it for so long, start to feel like maybe it is real. I mean, I can't blame people for believing in what they see. Then we get the next episode. We get Annie's episode. And we really get to know her as a character, because when she sees him, she's mean to him. She's like, I don't know who you are. But it is a little weird that he sees her face everywhere, and here she is. She's a real person. And she's not some famous model or anything like that. She seems like she doesn't have a lot of money. So it's not a coincidence like he's in love with some famous person. You understand what I'm saying? But then we get Annie's episode. Annie is totally flip side of the coin. She is not helpless. She's very can-do. She is a drug addict. She's addicted to this drug called like a pill A or something. And it almost is like heroin, the way she just like zonks out and gives into it. She has a little cry session. But she's clearly going through an addictive phase where she's trying to get off of it and say fuck you to it. We see her putting up posters for a dog she lost called Groucho. We see her signing up for something called Ad Buddy. It almost seems like virtual money, like Bitcoin or something like that. And she talks about how she wants to go to Seattle. But she's kind of living with a bunch of other people. She's not paying rent. And she starts hassling a friend in the park. Again, gambling with some purple robotic koala for this drug. And he even says to her, as a friend, you sound like a junkie. And she's like, I'm not a junkie. We see her talking to her dad, who is clearly going through such intense emotional distress that he's almost agoraphobe in this little tiny robotic container, and he won't leave it. So we get a little bit of her side of the coin. And when she shows up to the trial, the reason why she shows up to the trial is because they give out this pill that she wants. And if she goes to this trial, it's less about making the money and more about her getting the pill. But keep in mind, Owen went there with the best intentions. He just wants to make a little money. He seems to be a perfect candidate. It's very mysterious how they drop off money like an actual person drops it off. And all the while, Annie is literally threatening an innocent woman who works there that she'll, like, kidnap her daughter and doing whatever she can. She clearly has no morals. She has no problem saying the worst possible thing to your face. And she's not inherently evil, but there's just something missing there for her when she wants to get what she wants. And so when they meet at the lobby of the pharmaceutical trial, she's like, stop fucking talking to me. I don't know who you are. She just thinks he's like another weirdo trying to talk to her. But there's a moment, just a second of empathy, just a hot moment of it. When he comes up to her, he starts saying, like, what's the plan? What's the mission? What's the trigger word? He's feeling crazy and starting to snap. And she sees that. So she puts her hand on his shoulder and says, like, the first part of the mission is go back to your pod and sit there silently and wait my instructions. I think that's like the first little hint and note of their connection. Yes, it was a lie. Yes, it was fucked up, but I don't think she was doing it in bad intentions. She was trying to do the right thing. She saw a person cracking and she really could feel that. It's almost like she could see herself in him and wanted to do what she can't do for herself. Well, that's their first little connection, and this is important to know. Now, what is the pharmaceutical trial they're doing? Now, interestingly enough, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but I really liked when we got a bit of a great summary of what is the motivation for this trial, but almost how you would describe Owen and Annie's relationship. Dr. James K. Mantelray, played by Justin Theroux, is one of the doctors who created this pharmacy pill. And he talks about the idea of anything being born or connecting or growing is kind of almost impossible against all odds. And he talks about that the forces of nature colliding show us our infinite potential of our connections. And I think that's a perfect way to describe Annie and Owen. Anyways, so what is this trial? There are 3 pills. Pill A, Annie's very, very familiar with. Pill B, and Pill C. Pill A, and when they take this pill, they go under this, like, there's like a computer watching them, and they have these almost like Minority Reports, like robot helmet things on, and they go through these dream sequences, and it's all, the whole entire idea behind the trial is to get rid of inefficient human pain. It's not to remove you of any feelings, but help you overcome this trauma and live a better life. So it's honestly like a beautiful sentiment. So Pill A, and this is when we get to know how kind of deranged Annie is, that she's so addicted to this pill. Pill A pulls out your core traumas and brings them to the surface. So this is very hard to go through. But the reason why this is so important is this then creates a map for Pill B and Pill C to work through and work off of. So that means Annie, on the regular, is repeatedly experiencing her trauma over and over and over and over. Why the fuck would anyone want to experience that? Think you probably can't even think of the worst experience of your life because you probably block it out. Can you even imagine if it was pulled to the surface? And wouldn't that be the definition of hell? And yet she gets high off of it. She likes it. So we just get a little tiny peek into Annie's psyche. She's a functioning, fucked up person, as we like to say, right? Me and my committee. We got Pill B. Pill B identifies your self-defense mechanisms, because they say the brain is very intelligent, and the mazes you create, all your blind spots, and sources those out. And Pill C, and this is the big one, it's described as the end of the rainbow. This is when you confront the problems that you're experiencing, because now the blind spots have been taken away and the trauma's been, brought up, and you learn to have acceptance. And it's supposed to help you remap your brain. So it's very, very intense. By the way, side note, like I said, this is a very visually stimulating and goofy and quirky. I forgot to mention that it's got a lot of comedic elements along all this like drama and everything. The video that's introducing all of these pills and what these patients are basically going to experience is with Dr. James K. Mantle-Ray and Dr. Muramoto, played by, what is his name? I hope I wrote his name. Rem Konda. Anyways, these two are like going back and forth in kind of an 80s Bob Ross style, like disappearing and fading in, different colors. It kind of looks like, again, an 80s informational tape, a little bit corny and overjoyous with a little bit of posing and like out-of-date animations. I loved it. This is when we get to see Annie's trauma. I love how they do it too. You kind of forget you're in some sort of experiment. You think that you're looking at a flashback or something. And you are in a way and from her mind. We see Annie and her sister, her little sister. And we see how close they are. We see that her, like even back then, Annie was always kind of abrasive and very blunt. And it did bother her sister. But they were very close. But her sister tells her that she's going to be moving to New York. And they have a bit of a fight over the fact that Annie just won't take this picture of her sister. She keeps teasing it, taking other pictures, but it's upsetting her sister. She's like, I'm going to be moving whether you take this picture or not. Can we please have a picture together? So they're having a bit of an argument. They're driving around in the car, and unfortunately, a truck hits them, and they roll, and her sister dies. It is horrific and sad, and you really get why she's so beat up about it. In fact, we learn why she was looking for Groucho the dog, which is really so sad to think about. Apparently, her sister had a dog named Groucho, and when she died, Annie got that dog, and that dog, she lost it because she tends to do that. She tends to not follow through with promises and many things like that. And her looking for that dog that most likely will never be found is kind of a great little insight into her guilt and regret. And we get to understand, like, oh, that's why you take the pill over and over again. You kind of, I wonder if she kind of is like, I deserve this pain. I caused this, taking some sort of blame. Either way, I forgot to mention, Owen does not take the pill at this point. I think he's just very much against meds. You can understand why. But we do know his trauma is that he saw the girl that became the fiance to his brother, the person that he really loved and the person he hated most, when they became engaged. He was so upset he tried to commit suicide, but unfortunately when he fell off a roof and landed on a glass window, he didn't even die. He just got injured. And it was kind of almost embarrassing, which I would never speak of suicide like that, but it was an embarrassing moment that he had to unfortunately live through. Not that I'm condoning that he should have done it, but like you can understand him having to then face these people he really hates, like still be in the prison and then know his like most troubling time in his life is horrific. It's got many layers of trauma going on. Okay, so what happens when they first take this pill? They're totally separate. They're not together. They're doing their thing, but they get confronted by Dr. Muramoto. With Annie, they can see she has done this many times. They can see her brain has mapped this out many times. And they obviously are like, we don't know how you got those drugs, but we're confronting you about it. But more importantly, because you are so comfortable with this, you like this so much, you're honestly not really a good candidate that we can use. And technically, she wasn't supposed to be a candidate. She threatened a woman to get herself into it. Now, she was initially rejected, is what I'm trying to say. Owen, on the other hand, he unfortunately like tells Owen, like, I can tell that you didn't do it. I'm going to force you to take the pill, or we're not going to pay you, and you're going to leave. He like threatens him. He's like, you're going to leave with no honor, no money. It's no better way to walk into confronting your trauma than be patronized in the same way that causes your trauma. Now, when Annie is getting interviewed and she's about to get kicked out by like some weird cosmic fate, Dr. Muramoto dies. He just falls over. In fact, it happens so suddenly and quick and without warning that Annie sits there and folds her arm and she's like, is this a test? This is a test, isn't it? She eventually sneaks Owen in and lets her in on the secret that she was going to get kicked out, that he's died, that they're going to play it cool. She's going to get rid of her files that she was going to be kicked out, and they're just going to wait for someone to find his body, which again shows how much more guilt and feelings Owen has, like is seen as quote unquote the better good person, and she's totally fine with the guy being found later, whatever, this isn't our problem. Her only thing is she successfully got away with moving on with the trial and staying in. Because at this point, she wants to be prescribed more of those pills, and, you know, she wants to, oh, I just had an epiphany. Maybe that guy in the park's dad could have been Dr. Muramoto, or related in some way. Because that's how he had the pills. Okay, that doesn't matter. Sorry, side note. Anyways, so they successfully get the whole thing, get away with it. And someone else finds the body. And this is when we get to be reintroduced to Dr. James K. Mantelray, Dr. Mantelray. Now, apparently, him and the other man in the video, Dr. Muramoto, were rivals at some point, and they departed, they left. But this was Dr. Mantelray's brainchild, this whole experiment, this whole idea behind it. Interestingly enough, you see in the background and stuff like this, this book by a woman called Dr. Greta Mantelray. Coincidentally, his mother, played by Sally Field. Now, she is a therapist. I'm just going to throw that in. And she's got a whole kind of like successful franchise, book series. We see her ads sometimes in the background, stuff like that. So you can understand where his motivation comes in. He takes a more scientific, more forward momentum. He feels this is a better solution than talking about your feelings. And as we get to know his character a little more, he feels he was often misdiagnosed and scrutinized by his mother, and thinks that maybe talking about your feelings isn't the best way to do it. You kind of want to cut through all the bullshit that you put yourself through, that others put you through, and he feels like he has the answer, that he is superior, especially, like, you know, he clearly has mom issues. But either way, love how he's found, doing it to some hentai 3D alien creature fairy thing. I loved that which, by the way, I love, this is what I'm talking about when I say you're going to love these characters. Dr. Azumi Fujita, am I saying that correctly? Played by Sonoya Mizuno. Amazing. Love these two as like a little couple, as just general, like they're another pair that I love. You're gonna love Owen and Annie, and you're gonna love Dr. Fujita and Dr. Mantle-Rate. You're gonna love them. When she goes and gets him, he says this great line where he's like, if you braved the outside world to see me, I know it's serious. And even though they have disagreements, I think what makes them so lovable is that there's nothing but respect for each other, respect for the experiment, just talking very abrasive to each other because they at one time clearly dated. I don't know, it's beautiful. It's really, really fun to watch. Anyways, he gets brought into the experiment to finish it. And this is when we get introduced to Greta, G-R-T-A. No, not Greta, his mom. I know, this gets weird. Greta, G-R-T-A, the machine. The machine. And she is her own special weird character, and I love it. She's the one that when they're put into these little, like I said, the helmets, the futuristic helmets that help them through with these pills, the robot's there to help guide them, protect them, make sure they're okay, or so it seems at first. Because again, this show has like a little bit of comedy, surrealism, beautiful deep connections, feel-goodness, crying, and a little bit of a crazy robot thriller horror moment to it. We end up going into pill number 2 at this point. Everything seems to be moving smoothly at first, and we get introduced to the next, I would say the more first surreal experience, because no one knows this yet at the time, but Greta has a malfunction where some of her computer liquid drains and falls onto the 2 connecting wires for Owen and Annie. And this is one of those moments where you wonder, like, is it fate? Was it meant to be? I mean, Dr. Mantle-Rate talks about in the beginning the idea that it seems so impossible that any of these connections even happen, that they have, against all odds, they seem to work. And yes, one, and I think she was like 7 or something, were put next to each other, but when you connect a computer, why wouldn't you put it in numerical order? Why were those 2 together? And why did it leak and connect 2 of these people who felt they were connected? In fact, I forgot to mention this before I go into the whole connection and robot thing. This is important to notice. Annie, before they go into the whole second connection wave together, when they first talk, Owen and Annie, she later apologizes and says, I'm so sorry I did that to you. If I knew how fucked up you were, I would have never done that. I was just trying to make you feel better in the moment. I need you to understand that I sold my face to a company many years ago, so those ads you see everywhere, it's just my face they're using. It doesn't mean anything. I'm trying to see, what is the line she says? She says, as far as she is aware about the universe, she says there's no plan or pattern to the universe. It's all chaos. We got perfect juxtaposing ideas. He thinks it's all connected and means something, and she thinks nothing means anything because of the way her life turned out. And we get to know better who she is and like why she responded the way she did to her sister, what caused all the long-term personality things that damaged herself further and further and further, and might have been even the leading cause. Like, I mean, it wasn't her fault that her sister died. In fact, she even tells Owen she knows the gentleman. She says that, ironically, his middle name was like the initials F-U-N. Fun. His middle initials were fun. The truck driver who was high on some sort of medication, then he passed out and hit them. So this wasn't her fault. But I think it didn't help that she led a life that was so confrontational that it left her with so much guilt and regret. But to be fair, you could argue anyone would feel guilt and regret, it being survivor's guilt in that circumstance, even if they had a great relationship with their sister. So because this mysterious computer liquid that has forged their 2 connections together, unbeknownst to anyone, they start to go through their traumas together in a surreal-like state. In this version, we get to see Linda and Bruce, Annie's parents. And Owen is playing her dad, and Annie is playing her mom, Linda. And it's so weird and goofy. You can see why she's infectious and lovable. You can see why Owen in that moment both as the husband he's playing, and if he had met her in real life, would feel infectious towards her. You can feel their connection. They even have kids together, and she's a nurse, and she's helping some old lady, and this old lady's dying wish is that she gets her lemur back and gets brought to her daughter. But unfortunately, things don't end as well as it would seem. By the way, fun little slip it in, and these are moments that I'm like, did these things really happen in Linda's life? And when she was a daughter, when Annie was a daughter, she remembers this? Or is this just something playing out in her brain to help her through some blind spots or something like that? I'm not really sure. But when we see Bruce looking at a book by Dr. Greta Mantle-Ray, is that Owen's subconscious sneaking in there? Or did that really happen and by pure coincidence, some weird fate cosmic thing, Bruce was looking at that? I kind of love having that not fully answered, to leave that up to speculation and maybe argue it could be both and it would still be valid. But anyways, when Annie brings the lemur to the daughter, we learn that the daughter and her mom actually had a terrible, tumultuous relationship. And when they read the letter with the whole lemur and everything, the mom just basically tells her she's worthless, she's crap, that she loved this lemur more than she ever did. Things did not turn out as quote-unquote Annie playing as Linda would wanted. But even then, when she sees her reaction, Linda says, I think your mom's right. You shouldn't have kids. And the woman says, well, fuck you, I'm pregnant already. And this is where it gets weird and surreal. She says, just because of my, how much I hated my mom, I'm going to name him. And when she names her child, it's about swearing off to her mom, but the initials of his middle name would be Fun. And again, was this little boy actually born? Was this the one that actually murdered her sister? Or was this her brain trying to piece things together? I don't know. Because again, Annie wouldn't have been there as a kid to know about Linda's experience. But either way, this strips something down for her. And she ends up having a moment where she's talking to Owen. And she's talking almost as Annie. Like she forgets she's totally another person or anything. And she ends up telling him a story that when she was little, she remembers when her mom left. And she even says to this day she doesn't know if she's alive or dead. She just left. And she saw her dad sitting in this truck, which I think is the same truck she owns to this day. And this truck, she could see in the reflection her dad's sad crying face. And when he met eyes with her, she just kind of knew in that moment and how devastated and how much her life would change after that. And her sister was with her at the time. This is the moment when I think she transferred the stress she was feeling, like she couldn't deal with it, onto protecting her sister. She transformed it into that. So she held her sister's hand. She said, let's go bake a cake and pretend it's your birthday. And she got emotional thinking about her sister, was like, okay. And that's what she vowed, to protect her sister from all that pain in the world. But I think it was like a metaphor for her not dealing with her own problems. And maybe when her sister died, yes, of course she was sad that her sister died. This was like her one connection, the only person that really got her and knew the trauma she experienced. But I think it was almost a symbol of like, there's no more barriers anymore. You have to face your own shit. So as she's telling this emotional story to Owen, who is embodying Bruce, he even kind of, at the end of it goes, when did your parents get back together? And she says, what? Because they're still in this weird fantasy of it all. And in this world, he addresses that Linda's parents are together. And that technically never happened. We get a fun, weird, not high speed, I'm so sorry, that's the wrong word for it. A bunch of police officers show up to their door later because she did steal a lemur and make her husband put her through a position of pretending to buy a fur coat, and they, bombarded some woman with an old woman's dying wish. And we see this old classic car in the background, almost as if someone's watching them. Kind of like how Owen always feels with his idea of like fulfilling some sort of mission, greater purpose. And then we get kind of beautifully led into Owen's dream sequence. Now in Owen's dream sequence, it's very like noir 20s, which by the way, I don't think there's ever like an ideal time period because let's be real, things have always gotten better. Yes, there's certain classic time periods we love more than others, so we can talk about that specifically. And I wish I could have seen and experienced a time period where it was cool and normal to go to seances and meet a bunch of interesting people, whether they be artists or whatever, and everyone was there to discuss greater ideas, but not out of just purely like the ego of all of it, but to really get to the root of the answer, the truth, which almost I just realized is another beautiful metaphor. I mean, that's what he wants. He just wants the fucking truth. Is he seeing this shit or is he not? What is real? Is he a good person? Is he not a good person? Oh, what a beautiful epiphany to have at this time. And that's what he's doing. He is on his way. He's like a magician of some sort on his way to the seance. Oh, by the way, if you are interested in this type of stuff, on my other podcast, Mystery Storytime Podcast, I did a whole story about a haunted house, about a musician who haunts it. It's a gorgeous house by someone named Jesse Shepard. He passed away. He's dead. But it said he haunted the place, and he was known to throw these lavish parties. This was like all in Santa Fe, or was it San Diego? Somewhere in California. It was either Santa Fe or San Diego. And he would hold seances. He was like a big believer that he could channel spirits, and it enabled him to sing in a way that sounded like he was harmonizing with himself, like it sounded like two voices. So really cool, interesting. You should definitely check out that story, Jesse Shepard, on our Mystery Storytime podcast. But anyways, going forward, in this dream, in this world, he's at this party and he gets confronted by his like wife that it's this interesting kind of almost movie set where like he's still clearly married to her, the woman that Annie's playing, but she does a lot of sneaky stuff and he's always trying to avoid her and get away from her. And he's trying to get to something in this vault, or more specifically she is, and steal it, and he's trying to protect it. This is when it starts getting even more weird and more surreal, because we actually get to meet Greta, Grta, the computer. Yes, the computer Greta is in their dreams together. It's already weird that they're in each other's dreams and that this is the way they're, overcoming their trauma and getting over stuff. But Greta is in there, and she seems a little crazy. And it doesn't help that Dr. Muramoto is in the dream too. And he's in this weird zombie-like state. I thought it was interesting that they made a version of the machine he was using. We kind of saw him using the machine privately. We didn't know why. He was clearly taking the pills and doing it himself. But why would he do that unsupervised? It seems super dangerous. Like, was he addicted to it too? He has this like leather kind of old timey. When they used to have football back in the day, they used to just have like a leather helmet. It wasn't the hard helmet that's actually way more helpful today. So obviously concussions were way more prevalent. And these giant tubes that make me think of like Thimbleweed Park, a video game you should totally check out. And he is dancing in this zombie-like way. It's almost as if his spirit is trapped in the world. And she clearly seems connected to him and loves him. And she wants to somehow embody and talk to Owen and Annie, and she's addressing them specifically. But they kind of pull away from her and have their own conversation, and she holds a gun up to Owen when they get to the vault. The characters, they do, these two characters. And Annie's character holds a gun up to him because she wants to get what she wants. And Owen, when he addresses her, it's interesting because he's addressing, like in Pill B, they talked about getting rid of their blind spots, getting to the true source of the problem. It's like he's addressing his brother and all the people that have put him through the pain, specifically his family members. But the way Annie is being the one to confront him, I don't think he sees her as that, someone who like gets in his shit, but it's almost therapy for Annie to relive the way she treats people, because she does treat people like that. She doesn't trust them. She thinks she needs to hold up a gun to them and threaten them. That's why she threatened the woman about potentially kidnapping her child. So a lot of layers are going on through this miniseries. You can rewatch it a couple times and keep seeing multiple metaphors playing out, which is beautiful in a like filmmaking perspective. But if you're going to psychologically help someone through their problems, this would be the best way to go about it. It makes perfect sense to me. But he says to her, "You didn't have to use the gun. I would have given it to you." And she says, "That's your problem." And he said, no. He said, it's not. He said, my problem is that I let you get too close and you're poison. Is that not beautiful? Isn't that perfect? Like, you didn't have to threaten me, put me in this position to go on trial. I would have done it because, like, we're family and, like, I should love you guys and everything like that. But the bigger problem is not that I allowed you to do this to me. Or no, the problem is I did allow you to do this to me. That I thought there was something to have a connection with. But you guys are not on my team. You guys suck. And they really do. It gets worse, trust me. In between these dreams, by the way, there's this surreal, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind leaking of memories where sometimes their characters are dressed in a noir style, but they're in the lobby pod room of the pharmaceutical trial, and they see a tiny truck in this like fake, what is it called? It's like a fake little tiny model landscape. I guess that's what it would be called. And these little moments are peeking at deeper things they're still not hitting. They're just it's at the core. It's so funny how these tiny moments affect everything else. And in addition to that, this is an important moment because when the scientists see that the two are in each other's dream, they're like, no, this is dangerous. No, we have to separate them. This isn't supposed to be how it is. And they wake up Annie first before Owen, which is how Owen has a longer dream without her in it. And she wakes up, the first thing she says is, where's Ollie? I thought that was really a beautiful moment where she's already feeling an affection towards him. She's already calling him Ollie. Or wait, was his name Ollie in the movie? Either way, she's feeling connected to him and referring to his dream. And once she immediately sees, she kind of wakes up to Owen's perspective of thinking, this is crazy. Maybe we are connected. Unfortunately, though, when you think this is when all the like sunshine and rainbow starts, but no, Owen is convinced that he has been made to feel convinced, because this is what he's been trying to do his whole life, that no, this is not significant, this didn't happen, and plays in denial. Well, she's trying to confront him and be like, we need to talk about how special this is. I was wrong and you were right. And it's weird, I think this is what happens to anybody who unfortunately goes through some sort of situation where they're like made to feel like the victim. When you finally get the answer you want, you're not ready for it. You've been conditioned to take it, so to speak. So I don't blame him for initially pulling back and being like, no, this isn't happening. Now, because this situation happens, and this is obviously a problem, Dr. Mantle-Ray confronts his ex-girlfriend but partner, Dr. Ozumi, we'll just call her Ozumi, it's easier for me to say, Ozumi, and is like, okay, you guys brought me on here because something's happening, you gotta tell me what the hell is going on. What is with Greta showing up as a computer in all this shit? What is with them melting into each other's brain? There's something wrong. She explains that what was happening was there were previous deaths. And he was like, what? And he was like, 4. And he was like, devastated by this. Clearly, and this is why you'll like them. They're really lovable, goofy, weird characters. But they're essentially good people with good intentions. They do not want people to die. They actually give a shit if their patients die. And Azumi explains that at the time when he was gone and he was, dealing with his diagnosis and all that jazz, which is basically, he suffers from, like, too much masturbation and, like, porn addiction and stuff like that to deal with his trauma. She says that she gave Greta, the computer, a little bit of empathy to help them and save the patients from going in too deep. And it did, it worked, it helped, it solved the problem. But that was 5 months ago. And her emotions got much more complex. And she believes that Dr. Muramoto, in his spare time, she wasn't fully aware of it. She did catch him using the machine, but she didn't know why. That he was using an unethical workplace affair, which I love that she considers Greta equal. I loved that. And keep in mind, this is not a world where robots are humanoid, and, it's not that type of, what was that great video game called? Detroit? It's not like that. So it's really fun to see her consider her like a equal partner in all of this. And to be honest with you, she's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. She deserves it. So when Dr. Muramoto died, she's basically going through grief, and these patients should not be going through this trial, because if she's the catalyst, the person helping them move through all this shit, it's dangerous. She has way too much control, and she is mentally losing it. So during this time, this is all between pill B and pill C at this time. While the scientists are working out their drama, the patients are trying to figure out what's going on to them. They right away can feel like it's unethical. One woman says, like, what she went through was so traumatic and she would honestly stop if she could, but she really needs the money. Another man talking to Annie mentions something that I thought was, like, it's just a small little throwaway line, but I was like, you said it all, dude. He says, it doesn't make much sense to me telling people what's wrong with them before they can figure it out for themselves. It's like you're forcing something that most therapists would probably agree that one of the biggest healers is time. They probably know the answer a lot of the time before the patient has, but it's all about the patients figuring it out for themselves when they want to figure it out, when their body will let them. So it's important for them to notice. Now, you hear my little notes? I made many notes. This is when Dr. Mantle Ray James is like, okay, shit, we're in a situation against all odds and my difficult relationship with my mother, which it only gets weird and more complicated that he made this robot kind of off of his mother. He has to call her, and Sally Field's so funny in this. I love that she's like on her day off yelling at someone to turn off the music in her fanciful apartment, and you know, she clearly seems like she knows everything, but she's very excited to hear from her son and is very excited to diagnose him, which I'm like, girl, that ain't healthy. But she makes some fair points, to be fair. And I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at when I accidentally use words too many times. He calls her to be like, can you come in and basically console this robot? And it gives her the information to be like, you might be the person that helps her with this trauma. Keep in mind, this shit doesn't work out well. I loved when, and that's how amazing, like a true, what's the word? It's with a V. A veteran, that's what it is. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Veteran like Sally Field is, when you see her as the confident therapist talking to the disheveled and distressed, emotionally traumatized GRT Greta, and when she's talking to her, she sees how crazy she is, and she literally gets thrown out of the system, literally thrown out of a window to be woken up. And she explains to her son, listen, this girl is going from feeling like God to thinking she's one of the patients to being delusional. I mean, she's cycling through crazy emotions right now. You need to shut her down. This is not helpful, not healthy, and I don't think I can really do anything at this time. And, like, you wouldn't want to do this to any other person, to be honest with you, but I don't think this is a metaphor right now. This is just the circumstance. Before the, like, grand finale that is Pill C, we get this beautiful moment between Owen and Annie. He finally admits, yes, I remember you in the same dream. Annie says, you know, I've talked to other people. I don't think this is, like, normal. We're fated in some way. And Owen just kind of admits why he was pushing it off. He's just lost. He doesn't know what's real anymore. It's like finally something is happening in his favor, and he's too far gone. I really don't blame him for having trouble of, like, I mean, this is a pretty wackadoo thing going on too. Wouldn't you agree? If you were in that state, it would be hard to believe anymore, especially when people convincing you otherwise. He's definitely, I think his family was for sure gaslighting him at this point. And he also ends up making an agreement with her that no matter what, though, there is some connection there, and that they will do whatever they can to protect one another. That they will find each other no matter what. It's kind of, again, I don't mean to compare it because they're nothing alike, but it's kind of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like, you can't separate us no matter what. Even if you erase our memories, no matter what. And he also, I just want to food for thought, throw in this little story he tells about how he found a hawk and how he felt like he needed to protect it. But unfortunately, the hawk ended up eating his brother's, like, hamster or something. And the brother ended up killing it with a bat. And it's just a small little story. But I think it shows kind of like, I know the big trauma for him is watching his brother get engaged to the love of his life and unsuccessfully trying to commit suicide and stuff like that. But right then and there, his gentle and kindness being nonsensically destroyed by some sociopathic monster. Yeah. That's why I think it was really cathartic later for him when he turned into a hawk. So they take pill C. Again, like I said, against all odds, because at this point we know Greta's not stable. A lot of people have died in the experiment. Owen was even going to leave. Even went to talk to Greta, which I loved. Greta had like a sweet, compassionate conversation with him. But she ends up kind of basically admitting she's going to trap and kill the other patients. Again, beautiful moment when you're watching this. You're not quite sure if, like, is this in Owen's head and he's tripping? Or did she really just say that? He decides out of safety, because he wanted to keep his promise, to, and that's big for him, by the way. I wouldn't consider him a weak guy or a lack of courage. I think he's just been pushed around so much. He ultimately wants to make the right decision, but I think for him to go against his own, like, not even being sure of what's real and not real, and the people who have put pressure on him, for him to follow through and want to protect Annie was a really big moment in his life. So they go in there, and this is when you kind of have to, like, just kind of go along for the ride. When you see Jonah Hill, specifically, I know it's Owen, but Jonah Hill's character in neck tattoos, kind of like looking like a SoundCloud rapper with two little pigtails, speaking like he's, from a different background, it's really kind of goofy, because you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm walking into. But I thought it was actually a great interpretation of what a modern day mafia would be like. Especially with, like, the dad being a little more old school Italian and the kid taking on more of the personification of what's hip now. So that made sense. But we get a background of him having to be the quote unquote rat to the FBI for his family and dealing with that stress. And it's like the perfect metaphor of what he's going through in his life. Meanwhile, Annie is in The Lord of the Rings, essentially. It's not The Lord of the Rings, but it's totally The Lord of the Rings. When we saw her first day trauma, we saw that her sister said she knows this goofy elfin show is silly, but she loves it. So it was basically her taking back to that, or going into that world. And she has, and this is where it gets really important. Owen goes through his whole trauma. He experiences the whole thing. He ends up leaving his family and selling them out, running away with the girl at the waitress, having a family, and he kind of wakes up out of it. And I don't know if he necessarily got healed. He just felt it was more important to protect Annie than for him to overcome his own shit. And that was kind of, this is just a food for thought. Just take what I'm saying at will. But sometimes it's hard to overcome things because they are so wrong. There's nothing in your brain that will allow you to forgive the situation or the person. So sometimes you need something to be more, like, stronger, be a catalyst. It's like, I don't know if I can get over the fact that my dad was abusive when I was younger, but I can really care about the fact that I'm building parks and open spaces for the public. Like, that's where I'm putting my passion now. I can put my past to the past because I have something more important in the present. And sometimes that's the solution. In fact, I've actually heard before from therapists, not personally, just through, like, YouTube and shit like that, that sometimes when you say your trauma too many times, it becomes worse than if you had just kind of, like, accepted it and moved on. Does that make sense? Well, anyways, he turns into a hawk. He ditches he throws himself out the window. He wakes up from this dream, and he turns into a hawk, and he goes and finds Annie. He goes to her little weird world. But Annie's kind of at a point where she has finally come out of her own deranged dream. She's still in the Lord of the Rings setting, but she realizes she needs to say goodbye to her sister, and she still cannot say goodbye. She cannot let go of this trauma. And this is when crazy Greta shows up. GRTA, I'm always pointing out, the computer. And Greta makes this deal with her, being like, if you come with me, you can be with your sister forever. And initially, Annie's like, okay, I'll do it. And by the way, we do see, I love when Owen shows up as a hawk. He goes, "Look, Annie, it's me, Owen, as a hawk. I'm here to save you. I'm keeping my promise." And then Greta just like shoots him out of the sky and gets him out of there. When she takes Annie, she's full of shit. She's weird. She's crazy. She's literally the previous patients that have been said to have died, she's keeping them in these weird prison or comatose states, and Annie's about to be one of them because she's so desperate and lonely. She just wants them for comfort. But in fact, so it seems like even before Dr. Mirumoto died, she was already being crazy and like keeping these people. I just want to point that out, that Dr. Mirumoto dying wasn't the only cause for her delusions. And the promise she made Annie to have her sister with her is not true. Sister's nowhere near around. So when they get both pulled out of their realities, they still find each other. And they are brought to a new world. They are in the UN. And Owen plays this, or Jonah Hill plays Owen as this crazy, I don't know how to describe it, like over-the-top German character who is, again, just like his, when he was like a little gangster kid, mafia son, is going to be relieving information to a kind of almost like a state, something like the UN or something like that. And in this process, Annie shows up completely unaware, totally unconnected by the fact that she's Annie, and she's a Texan secret agent. And they push through all this fighting and shooting. Again, this is such a fun world to go through. Please go watch Maniac. But they get to this pivotal moment, and this is the most important part of all of it. Annie has this beautiful, tearful ending. Owen doesn't, keep in mind. Owen doesn't get a true conclusion. I think there is a sense of him standing up, but it's not like he hasn't stood up to his brother in these surreal dreams a couple of times at this point. But Annie, though, has a full-on cry session with her sister, one-on-one, admitting all the things she didn't admit before, admitting she was sad she didn't take the picture because she was afraid it would symbolize her leaving, all this shit. And she gets her conclusion. I promise you, you will cry up a storm. So what happens? Pill A, B, and C have been taken. We've gone on a crazy journey. They're together now, right? They're either romantically involved or they're best friends. What's the deal? Unfortunately, neither. Annie acts distant and cold again. I mean, she clearly overcame some trauma. She was able to talk to her dad, and her dad even overcame some of his own personal trauma and was now less of an agoraphobe out of the little tiny machine. And he was moving to a bigger space from the tiny little machine to the bigger house, and so he overcame some of his stuff. She seems like she did move forward, but why did she push Owen away? Was that too much of a reflection for her? That pain, that awareness that he symbolized, her overcoming that? Sometimes that happens. Sometimes people tell you a secret and they're happy they let that go and overcame that, but then you represent that secret they told and they don't want to know you anymore. And Owen's used to lying over. So he goes through this terrible situation where he goes on trial. He then they basically point out, unfairly use against him in the trial that he suffers from schizophrenia. And they show the disgusting video showing what the brother did, which is horrendous, I might add. And because all of this shit happens, the brother does get off, I think, scot-free. But they commit Owen to a fucking asylum. It's awful. And I don't even think it's a state-sanctioned asylum. It's like clearly it's like where all the rich parents control their children. Because he's like in a weird red jumpsuit. Like, I thought it was gross that it's like, you asked him to do this and this is how you repay him. Like, not trustworthy at all. But Annie kind of, by the way, loved the whole turn of events. I forgot to mention this. The way Annie got close to the woman, so she was able to get to the trial, is the woman was lonely. Again, this whole series talks about the idea of connection and loneliness. And she ends up wanting, you can rent a fake friend. And Annie pretends to be that fake friend before it's a ploy and she reveals her true intentions. She actually gets a fake friend to pretend to be Owen. And then when she sees that Owen was committed and kind of everything sinks together, she goes, fuck this shit. Fuck my lack of ability to get close to people. I'm going to go be there for him. He does not deserve to be there. And so she goes into the asylum. Oh, forgot to mention this too. This was a dream Owen had. Owen said that he had a fantasy amongst all the trauma. And his one fantasy is he's with a girl. He's smiling and laughing, and they're running away. He doesn't know who's after them, but they're running away, and they're smiling and laughing. And he says, I know it sounds stupid, but like we're just happy and we're free. And we just know each other. So I just want to mention that. At the very end, Annie goes up to him at the asylum, and it takes a bit of convincing. He's like, I'm not here, I'm crazy. And she points out to him, she's like, that is full of fucking shit. Your brother's crazy. He's the sociopath. There's nothing wrong with you. You're a little nutty, but that's okay. Who isn't? Come with me. I'm getting you out of here. And she busts him out. She even bought a new dog. I think it was like Groucho 2.0 or something cute like that. She got a new dog. She finally accepted what happened to the old dog and her sister. She breaks him out, and they leave with their truck, and they get out of there. And it's such a beautiful end. It's such a happy end. So they end up just being close. And I kind of love that. I love me some romance stories of any gender, any kind. Love that type of thing. But something that's kind of been blooming up recently, I've noticed in many stories, is that obscure connection. It's like beyond friendship, and it could potentially be romantic, but I think it's more spiritual, and it goes deeper than many labels. And that's something I think we can all get down with, and this did it incredibly well. I wish there was a season 2, but honestly there won't be, and they did an amazing job, and more people need to talk about it. It's beautiful. They have a happy ending. It makes sense that it's not linear, because that's not how you deal with trauma. There's lots of beautiful metaphors. The characters are kooky and lovable and weird. The setting's amazing. I can't tell you to watch this series enough. I promise you it's so good. But if you liked it, the way you liked this episode, the way I loved recording it, please give it a like or subscribe on whatever platform you're on. I actually am setting up a Patreon that I'll leave the link in the description below. If you want to throw $1 to support me, I would love you forever in the most platonic way possible. But either way, guys, have a beautiful day. I can't wait to talk to you in the next episode. Bye!